Well, there's not much to introduce Wingchi Ip for here because he's already been on campus. He's well known in California. And I met him in 1992, going to spend a week at a tea farm from which he bought tea. We have been friends ever since, and I think that's about all you need to hear from me. We need to hear from Wingchi. Unfortunately, as the Italian saying goes, it happens to the living, succede ai vivi. Wingchi got confused with his passport and his visa. So that's why he's in Hong Kong and we're here. So Wingchi, let's see if modern science can actually make you appear. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Chairman, Catherine, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon. I'm very sorry I cannot attend. I missed the chance to join you in this great event in Davis with you today. And but I hope every success to all of you, and congratulations to Catherine, to all of you. And then we have the launching of the Global Tea Initiative. And actually, Catherine has put much effort to promote tea here in Davis with me for a few years. And actually, we had made an exhibition of my calligraphy and design on tea things here 3 years ago. And then we traveled and did research together in China and so on in order to build up something about tea here. And I'm so glad today to see the great progression here and she has made today. Okay, let's come back to my topic today. I'd like to introduce a special teaware called Yixing. Yixing, the title is Yixing is a gem of teawares. Actually, Yixing teapot is much appreciated by the connoisseurs of tea for a long time, both in China and Europe, since the 16th century. It is praised for the property to improve the taste of tea. So this is the best teaware to make a good tea. So in a cabinet of the Chinese tea connoisseurs, usually you can find them, they have a big collection of somewhat about a dozen of pieces of the Yixing teapot to fit for different brewing tea and different sizes. Okay, go on to my next. Before we start, maybe it is good to know what is Yixing. Actually, Yixing is the name of a town located west of Shanghai. And I remember if we travel by a car, it takes about 2 hours, but maybe faster now. In this town, there is a very unique and special kind of clay, which is called Zisha, is mined here. As this clay is not found elsewhere, so we usually attribute the wares made with this kind of clay as Yixing ware. Or sometimes we call this kind of ware as Zisha ware. Then it is also good to know what is Zisha means in China. Next. These two Chinese characters literally means purple sand. But actually, the character Ji or purple means a dark brown color in the old days. Sometimes they even use this character to describe the color of one's skin, usually very sunny tinted. So the real meaning of Zisha should be a brown colored sandy clay. Next, please. Basically, the Zisha clay has three colors. Depends on the content of the iron oxide. Usually, it varies from chocolate brown to dark red and to beige yellow. It depends on the iron contents inside. The brown one varies from 8% to the yellow one 3%. The Zisha clay has a very special structural composition. When it is made, this is very important, and fired properly, it forms layers of hexagonal crystals and hence it forms a lot of holes in between. As we know, air is a bad conductor of heat. Therefore, the clay body of the teapot can keep the heat much better than the common porcelain or glass. So it is very good to extract more flavors and aromas from the tea. So since the Ming Dynasty, people recognize this property, and since then it became the very important part of Chinese teawares. Next, please. As the character Sha denotes, the clay is sandy in property. Therefore, it cannot be thrown on wheels by hand. So they have to develop a very special techniques to make the Zisha wares beating by a pedal. So here are some instruments and tools they use for making the Zisha wares. So let's go on for a few photos. And there will be a short video at the end of this PowerPoint to show you the process how to make a Yixing teapot. So you can understand more about that. It is very, very different from the common porcelain or ceramics we saw and to be thrown on the wheel. Okay. So we come to a little bit about the history of Zisha teapot. The birth of the Yixing teapot is closely related to the habit of tea drinking. There is a very important event in the tea history. In the Song Dynasty, the tea is drunken in a light paste made with the tea powder grounded from the tea cakes. It is quite similar to the matcha today in Japanese tea ceremony. Then it is stirred quickly with a bamboo shaft. This method is still adopted in Japanese today. In 1368, the next photo please, Zhu Yuanzhang, he is the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty, took over the reign and called Ming. On the 7th year of Hongwu, this is his calendar, and the Chinese people like to have their special calendar for each king. In the year of 1374, Zhu made a very important announcement to stop the making and the tribute of the tea cakes and ordered the people to drink loose tea leaf. Therefore, it brought a big change in the teaware from tea bowls to teapots. Next, please. We can roughly divide the development of the Yixing ware into 7 stages. I would like to call the first one as starting stage. It started around early Ming Dynasty till the period of Wang Li. Many Chinese scholars dated the beginning of Yixing ware up to the Song Dynasty. But I'm quite disagreeable to this conclusion, as one of their important evidence is a poem from the Song Dynasty. But I think they have misunderstood the poem, where the purple clayware at that time should be the teapot of Jianyao in Fujian. And also, they have neglected the tea culture background, because in Song Dynasty, there is no way to drink the loose tea leaf. Next, please. So we can see in the early Ming Dynasty, a painter, his name is Zisha Ware. He is a very famous Chinese painter. Next, please. This is his painting, a very famous painter. And also, he is a calligrapher. He was born in 1521, the first year of Jia. Next, please. He wrote a very famous poem mentioning he is going to buy some new teaware from Yixing. So it is proof Yixing is a very fashionable thing at that time, in 1521. This is not the only example. Another painting painted by Ming, a very famous painter also, in 1531. In the picture, it depicts a teapot on the host table, brown in color. It is quite likely a Yixing teapot. You may notice the teapot is quite large in size. Also in another painting, painted a little bit earlier by another famous painter called Tang Yin, who passed away in 1523. In his picture, you can also see a large overhead-handled teapot on the scholar's table. Seemingly, teapot is very popular by the beginning of 16th century, and it is very likely made from Yixing. Next, please. This is a teapot in the shape of a tea knob, attributed to be made by Gongchun, who is attributed to be the first potter of Yixing. The story said he was a servant to a scholar who went to study in a temple. And then this young guy saw the monk in the temple make the teapot. So he invented this one. But certainly this is only a legend, and this teapot is certainly made much later, I think in the Qing Dynasty. But the next please. But the next teapot is found in the tomb, will be the exact example of what a teapot looked like in 16th century. It comes from the tomb of a very high rank called Unglazed, who died in Jiajing Ring. It has an overhead handle, very similar to the painting, with a full round body, which shows the pot is fired unevenly with patches of glaze. And also inside the lid, you don't have any lip, but just a cross to fix it to the pot. The patches of glaze spots shows it was fired with other glazeware. But later, all this kind of pot is fired in a box. So the quality will be much better, cleaner, and the fire temperature is better. Next, please. This is another example called the monk cap teapot. And at that time, the Ming Dynasty believed in Lama Buddhism. So they have this kind of cap. The monks wear this kind of cap. And the teapot is made in a very primitive techniques. Next, please. I call the next one is the classical period, because the Yixing teapots had a great leap in the Wanli reign. One of the reasons is at that time, the Chinese scholar liked tea very much. They studied about tea, they wrote about tea, they promoted about tea, and even they are involved in making the tea and teawares. They were very proud to be a true connoisseurs of tea. So hence, we find many notes and books about the tea written in this period. It is said the potters come to be very close to the scholars and made friends with them. Under the advice and suggestion of the scholars, the potter began to make smaller teapots in order to brew tea better. One of the best examples is the scholar named Chen Ji Ru. Next. He was in a very close relationship to a famous potter named Shi Da Bin. This great potter absorbed the appreciation of the scholars' aesthetics to make the pots with the taste fit to the scholars. And she even started to sign his teapot with calligraphy. It became a fashion later. Next, please. These are several teapots made by Shi Da Bin. Some of them are excavated from different tombs. Next, please. This teapot needs to be worth to mention about a little bit about that. This red teapot is from the Beijing Palace Museum, which was grouped into the lacquerware collection and was accidentally found to be a Yixing teapot made by Shi Da Bin in late 1980s. So this teapot tells us the scholar's humble appearance is not the cup of tea for the emperor. So the emperor sent it to the royal workshop in the palace to coat them by lacquer and then have very elaborated carving. Next, please. This overhead handle teapot is from Nanjing Museum, not from the tomb, and also attributed to be made by Xi. And then there will be a decline actually in this classical period when the Ming Dynasty fell. About 50 years, they stopped making any Yixing teapot. And then it came to the Kangxi time. So the following pictures show some pieces of Yixing ware made in the Kangxi period. One of the very distinctive creation is they do some natural forms imitating from nature. In these teapots, you can see the forms are elegantly designed, and the lines are simple and strong. The craftsmanship and techniques gradually become to mature. I would like to describe this stage. The teapot looks a little bit bony, with a strong structural skeleton. Next, please. In the reign of Qianlong Emperor, China reached its peak in both political and economic development. The overseas trading was flourishing as well. And the Emperor Qianlong himself was a serious tea lover. He visited the tea farms in Hangzhou, and one of the famous stories, he weighed all the water he found in Beijing. And finally, he found a spring in Jade Mountain, Yuchuan, is the best, because the same amount of water, it weighs less. So the tea can be brewed much better in this soft water. And also with his order, many well-designed tea sets and teawares were made. If you go to the National Palace Museum in Taipei, you can even see some tea baskets with teawares in the whole set there. Next, please. So here are some examples of his special personal teapot, decorated with his poems. Next, please. So you can see all this teapot. In this stage, the forms are more massive. If I say the classical period, the lines are, it is more bony or skeleton. At this time, the teapot looks more muscular or more fresh. So you can see the lines are rounder and cursive. And also, many decorative techniques were applied. Next, please. You can see there are several exportware to Europe, which were treasured by Europeans very much. And also there were a lot of replicas in Europe, like Meissen, or another very famous one is Wedgwood. You can still see the similar kind of ware produced by this British factory. Next, please. To the end of the Qianlong period, the economy of China declined. Part of the reason is the emperor restricted the overseas trading in 1757, and also because the population has grown very fast. So the demand of the teapot decreased, especially those highly decorative export ware. Fortunately, at this moment, the scholar revived and added some new inspiration to the development of teapots. One of the most important figures was Chen Hongshou. He was a famous calligrapher and a silk carver. So on his office duty near Yixing, he got to know the potter Yang Pengnian. So this gentleman Chen, during the leisure of his office, he designed many teapots. He also hired Yang to make the teapots for him. He also employed his skills of silk carving. He carved directly on the teapots. Next, please. The following are some teapots made by him or influenced by him. So I call this period is transforming stage. You can see the shapes of the teapot become simple and geometric in order to leave a large space for decoration with calligraphy and scripts. Next, please. This teapot has a Yixing body or a clay body. And then outside, they coated with a layer of pewter. So the scholars did the inscription on the pewter. I think one of the reasons is it can protect the teapot on one hand, but more important is the pewter is very soft. So they can make the teapot first and send them to the scholars, and then scholars try their hands to carve on the teapots. One of the famous examples is Zhu Jian. This Mr. Zhu was a very famous calligrapher and silk carver too. Next, please. At that time, there's a famous potter called Xiao Daheng, and you can see he has a very high techniques and craftsmanship. He makes some very complicated teapot. This teapot is in Nanjing Museum. So by the end of Daoguang, China suffered from a lot of opium wars, Taiping Rebellion, and many diplomatic failures. So they have a lot of battles in China. So the China in a bad time, both politically and economically. It experienced the bottom of the depression. Yixing was located in the center of several battles, and many potters were killed. So the industry met a very serious decline or stop. The production shrank, the quality lowered, and there is no creation. They only copy the forms with less balanced proportion and low craftsmanship. I don't have much example here, and you can see this teapot is very common. Until the end of the Qing Dynasty, though China was weak, very weak by the fall of the dynasty, and China was occupied by many military powers at that time. But the international trade is flourishing. As Shanghai, especially Shanghai, it became an international city where it is next to Yixing, so the production of Yixing resumed to quite an extent. Even though the quality of the products are not very good, but still they have a lot of new creation, especially those connected with scholars and some antique dealers. They hire the top Yixing potters to do the replicas or imitation to the famous potter and to make some collectibles for rich people. Actually, in Hong Kong Teaware's museum, Mr. K.S. Low had a large collection of teapots. Those famous teapots from the Ming Dynasty actually are made in this period. Even though they are not the original one, but they represent a very high standard of artistic quality. So here are some examples of the teapots. And then we came to the new China, established in 1949. At the beginning, the industry went into a great reform. All the private companies or the individual potter had to close down their business and were gathered together in the national operated factories, including the very famous master Gu Jingzhou, Zhu Kexin, and Wang Yinzun. At the beginning, very few new designs were created. Until 1980, when a Hong Kong collector, Mr. K.S. Low, he donated the Teaware Museum in Hong Kong, as I mentioned. He started to resume the business. And then from 1980s, in these few decades, tremendous changes happened to the whole industry. And also the price, I must say. Because in 1980s, the teapots only cost you several $10, and now it can charge you several million. Actually, the most important issues were the potter going to be individual. Also, private companies started. Many small workshops are flourishing. And their apprentices were trained in formal school, in art institute, or even universities. So there is a great lift for the Yixing Teaware. and the teapots were welcomed by collectors and become very, very expensive now. But I'm very happy to see there are many, many new design, new innovations. All this encourage the people to explore new techniques. So I finished my PPT now, and here is a video download from YouTube, only for a brief demonstration.
We're going to see if I can talk to Wingchi. Okay. Thank you, Wingchi.